Hey Josh, can you hear me? Awesome. Doing great. Just looking forward to breaking down some Big 12 action with you. I know we did a podcast when I first tried to do launch my podcast a couple years ago, and I thought that was a ton of fun. So definitely been a guy I've been trying to have on Find Your Inner Pirate and get you on this Twitter space. I think it'll be a good time. Oh, it's back. Yeah, it's back in a big way tonight. We got Florida, Utah going, and I got Nebraska, Minnesota on my two TVs. Those are fixing to kick off. Been watching a little bit of UConn. Um, took them plus 14 and a half. So we got some bets going tonight. Um, yeah, yeah, and they sent the big time broadcasting crew, Kirby and Fowler, to call it tonight. So that's when you know college football is really back, and it'll feel even more so Saturday when we get all these teams kicking off. Week 0 was okay last week, a little bit of a bloodbath for your boy. I went 1-3 on picks, and it was just that USC game kind of cost me. But water under the bridge now, Josh. Are you excited for the Big 12 this year? It's a new look Big 12 going through some transition.
Yeah, well, it's an open league, really. What's kind of crazy is, the four newbies kind of like I'm going back and forth whether or not it's a good time for them or bad timing because, if they weren't good 3, 4 years ago, they wouldn't be in the Big 12 now. But I
Right.
don't think there's a single one of them that's currently ready for Big 12 play. I mean, UCF's probably going to be the best out of the bunch this year, but Houston's
Yeah.
on a downswing, BYU's on a downswing, and Cincinnati also, I think, is going on a downswing, but they might be able to
Yeah.
surprise us. So,
I think
yeah, going to be interesting because it's so wide open.
exactly. That's a great word for this league this year's open. I 100% agree with that. And I think it will be a little bit of a tough adjustment for those programs, but man, you know better than anybody. This league, this Big 12, they just play close, exciting games, especially last year. It felt like anybody could beat anybody at any time. And I think it'll be like that this year. We're going to talk about Texas here in just a second. I know a lot of people think Texas is head and shoulders above this league this year, but I don't know, Josh. You can say I'm looking at it through crimson colored glasses. I mean, we've seen this. I've seen this my whole life with Texas. It's talking season. This is when they're at their best. When they have to actually go win games on the field, we'll see if the hype is still there.
Yeah, that's kind of thing with Texas. Um, there is no, if you're being just purely objective, purely looking at the numbers, Texas is the best team in the Big 12. There's no other way to argue that. But the only thing is, they've disappointed so much. And yes, this has happened in the past, going into their '05 national title season, but that was a much better team than this one, where they hadn't really won anything. But now all of a sudden, Texas is, it's been a decade since they've done it. And this isn't the first time we've looked at Texas and been like, well, that's probably the best team in the Big 12. It's happened before in the last decade.
Yeah,
So I do agree. It's tough to pick Texas
yeah,
because of the recent history, because they've always disappointed. I mean, if they put it together, they're the best team. But will they? Probably not.
yeah. And I heard a stat earlier this week. Texas has only gone over their preseason win total one time since 2011. That
Which
just
is
shows you
that's
how much how overrated they are. I mean, they're a lot like A&M. They love talking season. This is where they're at their best when they don't have to talk about the games on the field. That's being a Sooners fan growing up in Texas. I definitely felt a lot of that with my friends and all that. So Texas and Texas A&M, they got a special. I have a special hatred for those programs, but at the end of the day, Josh, I'm a gambler. I'm a college football fan, above OU fan as the older I get, and so I want to see Texas lose games, but it's not quite. it's not quite the at the boiling point it was when I was a younger kid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying, but that's the thing. Once you get into media, once you start talking, like you got to be unbiased. You got to be able to take away those biases, which
Hmm.
is basically what I try to do. But we look at Texas, it's as we just talked about.
I think
I
it's
don't know if they
crazy
can
they're
get over the
minus
hump. I don't
money.
know if I can pick them to get over the hump, but there's no other way being objective to say like they're not the best team in the preseason. But we hear that every single year. So once
Yeah.
again, it's will they live up to the hype? Probably not. They haven't. Even though last year they got very unlucky. They had like a 98% win probability against Texas Tech and Lubbock. Lost that game. Lost a
Uh
bunch of
huh.
close games. They should be a lot better in close games, but again, it's Texas. They've done that before to where they had a year they lost a bunch of close games, lost a bunch of fumbles, had their fair share of bad turnover luck, and then the next year they come back and they're just a bad team, and that's possible. It could happen there.
Uh huh.
The biggest thing they do have for them, I'll tell you, is Quinn Ewers coming back, and his backup's going to be Arch Manning, number one recruit, who's
Yep.
probably a good quarterback if Ewers struggles or gets hurt. So that is the number one thing Texas does have going
Yeah.
for them this year.
And that's kind of my hot take with Texas. I really think Quinn Ewers is the definition of overrated. He's the poster boy for he's perfect for Texas. He's just a hype quarterback, and I think they lose to Alabama badly. They lose to OU. I don't think it's out of the question that we see Arch Manning take over a little bit, kind of like we saw Caleb Williams take over for Rattler. I'm just not a
Um,
Ewers guy at all, Josh. I'm that.
that's a possibility. I do believe in Ewers, but I think if he loses the job, it's not a sense of Ewers isn't any good as much as just Arch Manning's just living up to the hype. I think
Uh huh.
that's I think that's more the case if he gets replaced. But I
Right.
do like I don't think he was terrible last year. I think he had some pretty good games. He's just you got to remember last year is like basically his true freshman year because he moved up
Yeah,
to be reclassified. So
that's a
sorry, I'm
good
kind of
point.
also like looking for my stupid remote for my other TV to get that set up, and I don't know where I put it, but I like just had it too. There it is. Okay, we're good to go.
Yeah, no, I
Had to get all the
agree,
games
man.
on.
I
So yeah,
agree.
but I can multitask. I can look for my remote and
Yeah, no,
talk.
that's a great point. Ewers really was kind of his true freshman season. So I probably am being a little too hard on him, but I just can't get that Oklahoma State game out of my head. I just and the hair too. I'm sorry, it just doesn't look like a real quarterback to me. And I think
long,
I think
long
Arch
hair is what
Manning's going to
doesn't
take
do it.
over.
The
Uh,
long hair won't do it for you.
I just can't win with that, Josh.
It's, I mean, hey, you never really know with these guys. Like, they're still young. I think Ewers, I'm on the opposite side of you. Ewers coming into his second year, I think it'll be really good. I think Texas will be really good. I think they'll
Yeah,
stumble in some sort of game that they couldn't that they shouldn't because that's what they've been. I mean, Texas is
yeah,
the best average recruiting class in the Big 12. Texas had a pretty good team, a relatively good team last year, and probably should have put up a better record than they had. So again, I think Ewers is going to be pretty good, but I do think it is also a possibility that Arch Manning eventually takes his spot. Not necessarily with anything. If Ewers doesn't come out and light things up, or if Texas
right.
has some close games early, and that's kind of the thing
And
when you get
that's
to the Red River Shootout, OU fans probably want Ewers to have a pretty good showing at Alabama.
uh huh. I just can't get on board with laying money for them to win the conference. I think that's a crazy bet, and I've heard a lot of smart people in the media podcasts I listen to. A lot of people they think it's a smart preseason bet, and I just can't get behind with the history of the Big 12, with the history of Texas. I mean, Texas and OU take everybody's best shot in this league. I mean, it's not even. Oh, Utah, big play. Utah just scored a touchdown.
Touchdown. I got on YouTube TV, so which is nice. They have the
Oh, my bad.
multi-view, which is like really nice. It was like right when you were saying that he was walking in the end zone. So
Yeah. But anyways, look, I'm thinking we'll just go team by team like we did with Texas there. Let's go ahead and talk about OU here. Plus 425 to win this conference, Josh, and I'll go ahead and say it. I already bet it. It's just a play on history for OU. I think, everything that could go wrong went wrong for Venables in that first year. And I just think things just were such a dramatic change going from Lincoln's soft country club atmosphere to Venables, and the change at the strength and conditioning coach, getting Jeremy Schmidt back in there. I think it was just a huge change of pace for all the kids. And I think OU is got a soft schedule. I think they're set up to really take a run at this thing. Last year in the Big 12, call me a homer, Josh, but I just think they're going to figure out a way to win this conference this year going out.
Well, I mean, some of the same that applies to Texas applies to OU. They're an unlucky team last year. They went 0-7 in games decided by a touchdown or less. Probably more of like a 9-ish win team last year. They're the second best average recruiting class in the Big 12. Um, on the flip side, I'm not a big fan of Brent Venables. I think he's far too conservative as a coach.
Mm,
Burning your timeouts in the wrong spots, not going for it in fourth down enough. Classic things that'll hold you back. And it's even bigger now in college football. When you even look at the Tech game last year, where there's coaches that are being more aggressive, that are stealing games by going for it on fourth down when the other coaches aren't, which is exactly what happened in Lubbock last year.
yeah,
Um, so the other thing, too, like, as far as the strength and conditioning, I don't care who the strength and conditioning coach is. I don't think it matters. I don't think it's that big. I don't think any fan should ever care who it is. I get it. There's a lot of former players that played for the dude. That was like the first major guy they worked out with. But the other issue is, you talk about this guy, like I argued with this a bunch when I was on the radio, and he left Oklahoma to go to A&M, and people were talking about how big of a loss it was. And I know you went 44-8 the next 4 years, which was without Schmidt, which was the best 4 years. And I'm not saying he's like bad or anything. All I'm saying is it's a strength coach. Like, it's not.
yeah,
You're digging too far in the program if you're looking at a strength coach. That's the
yeah,
main purpose. But Oklahoma, I mean, as far as the Big 12, they're the most dominant team in the Big 12. Again, the biggest thing I worry about is Brent Venables being too conservative. But the number one thing they have is just their strength of schedule is just so easy. The non-conference is really weak. Um,
yeah,
Conference home games going to be a little easier. The road games aren't going to be as tough. I know Bedlam and Stillwater this year. Maybe I'm not big on Oklahoma State either.
no,
So this is the schedule. I mean, if Venables doesn't get it done with this schedule and this team, I would be very worried for the future of OU football. If he
yeah.
does, then it's a good sign. But this
Do
is
not want to go limping into the SEC.
right.
That's another
It's
disappointing
just
year this year.
it's more so. I mean, just like the schedule is just so easy that this is just a big shot for OU to go to the playoffs, for OU to make a run at the title game. Is this team good enough? Actually, I don't think they are good enough to make it to the title game. I do think they can make a playoff push. If you win the Big 12, you have a chance to make it to the playoffs, as TCU showed.
Yeah,
So I think that's the big thing for OU is this is just another chance to get to the playoffs, and it's a good chance, and it's mostly schedule aided.
yeah, and I agree with all that. I think Dylan Gabriel just needs to play better, stay healthy, and this defense, man, they got to hold up their end of the bargain. When are we going to start seeing some real Oklahoma defense, Josh? I haven't seen it enough in my lifetime, and it pisses me off, dude. Like, we can get athletes. Why can't we field a cohesive defense just one time?
It's funny enough. The first time when we were talking about OU's defense falling apart was like late 2000s, and that's when a lot of the stats coming in was like per drive efficiency, which makes a
Hmm.
lot of sense. And the defense was actually pretty good around them per drive. They were just playing faster than everyone else on offense.
Right.
And then around 2000, I don't know, 13, 2014 started slipping. And every September, people talk about how great the defense is. Last September, I was at the Nebraska game when they basically shut down Nebraska. I think they gave up like 14 points, but only 7 of that came in garbage time. And people hyping up the defense. Next week they go out and give up 42 to a K-State team that had lost to Tulane previously. So
Oof.
yeah, as far as that, I don't know if the defense is going to be good. I mean, you think it's going to be improved, but it's like we talk about with Texas. We think Texas is always going to be improved, and it's just not
Yeah.
something you can see when you're talking about it for 12 years each time. something you can look at and be like, yeah, the defense is going to be good this year. I mean, it's not. I'm not going to buy into the defense. I'm not going to think it's good if they're still giving up not a lot of points. Or the defense still looks good going into October. Okay, I'll buy. Or I really should say going closer to mid October, but
Yeah.
I am not banking on that happening. But
How
I
many
do think it'll
times
look
have
good in
we been
September. They have a weak schedule,
how many
so
times have we been suckered into thinking this defense is good too after a couple early good season performances?
it's every year, man. Every single
Yeah.
year, Jay. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just
So,
this is why you can't go into you can't go watch Arkansas State. Oh, you play Arkansas State and be like, oh, this guy's gonna be good, and this guy they're not.
uh-huh.
Arkansas State's not on the same level. Like, yeah, everyone's gonna look good against Arkansas State. They're 35-point favorite. So I mean, the
Totally.
only thing we can get from it is if they don't look good, then we have a major problem.
Yeah.
So
So,
it'll be about. I mean, even playing Cincinnati, Iowa State, I think those are going to be two weak offenses this year. So it'll be about the Texas game might be the first time they have a real test on an offensive team, and I do think Texas's offense will be good this year.
yeah, no doubt. There's just with wrapping up with OU, there's a lot of questions got to be answered, but I do think, getting them plus 400, I like that bet, and I'm just going to ride with it, Josh. It's gut feel, OU's going to do it this year. Kansas State plus 700 to win this conference. The reigning conference champs, and for my money, the best head coach in the league is Chris Kleiman. You know, they have the best offensive line. They just play physical football, and they know their identity. Is something a lot of teams in this country don't know is their identity. And Kansas State seems to always know who they are. They're going to be a tough out for you every week, and I like the Wildcats in this new look Big 12. I like the future for them, and I'm just high on them in general.
Yeah, the Wildcats are a weird team. I think they're properly rated in the preseason. Don't think too high, too low. I mean, I think a 9-3 team is probably about what they get. They went to the Sugar Bowl last year, won the Big 12, beating TCU in the Big 12 championship game. But they're a scrappy team year in and year out, and we say that because they're a team that generally doesn't throw the ball; they generally run the ball. But I do
Mm-hmm.
think I like what Kleiman does up there, and they don't recruit the best players, but they get the most out of them. And K State's still a
Yeah,
good team. I think they're definitely going to be a team in the title fight.
yeah, no doubt. And they play at Missouri week 3. Should be a really interesting matchup. Old Big 12 rivals, and that should give us a good feel for how good they're going to be this year. They got Will Howard back at quarterback, so I think they could challenge for another conference championship. There's no doubt. And they have this. I'm just not sure they have the same ceiling as they did last year with Deuce Vaughn and that defensive lineman that got drafted by the Chiefs. Maybe Drew. My buddy Porter's in here listening. Big Chiefs fan. Did they draft Felix and Duke Ozama, or am I just making that up? I don't know if he can talk, but yeah, Kansas State interesting. Just because I think Chris Kleiman's the best coach in the league, and he puts his team in position to win every week. Good game planner. Lincoln Riley could never. Um, Lincoln Riley just could never figure him out. Hold on, my buddy
Um,
Drew's gonna talk.
Kleiman was. Oh, sorry. Kleiman. It wasn't Kleiman last year. Kleiman's first year or was it the second year? I mean, I don't think Riley really faced him much. Didn't get much of a chance. I know
I think it
Kansas
was his
State's had their
second
way with
year.
OU the last couple of years. Yeah. So I don't think Riley didn't even. I don't even think Riley faced him. I mean, if he did, it was only like one time. So I don't know if we can say that. But Kleiman's well. K State's had OU's number the last few years. I mean,
Uh
it is
huh.
what it is. They're a decent team, and they've been able to pull the upset when they play OU.
Yeah. Drew, were you gonna talk? Am I just making that up that they drafted this kid out of Kansas State?
They took him with the first round draft pick, with the draft being
Yeah.
in Kansas City. FAU has been a beast so far this preseason, so Kansas City's pretty
Hell yeah.
excited about him.
Hell yeah. I think he's a good player, man. The Big 12 doesn't produce a lot of first round picks on defense, but they did produce a couple with him and Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. and we're gonna move it into Texas Tech right now, Josh. That 10-1 to win this conference, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like that. I like that value. I think Joey McGuire has these guys heading in the right direction. They were spunky last year. We mentioned the Tyree Wilson draft pick. Um, they had a winning conference record for the first time since 2009. I didn't realize it'd been that long, and I think McGuire's got them headed in the right direction. I look for them to take another step forward in a wide open league. I don't see any kind of reason why they couldn't play for the be in Dallas playing for the Big 12 title.
Well, I think the main reason is just not a good team. Tech, I know. I do like Wells. I like that he is more aggressive. But I am not buying this Tech team.
Mm,
I think it's kind of one of those teams that made a big jump year over year, and you kind of fall back down to earth in that it's really hard to make a big jump to sustain it. It does happen, but it's rare, and I think just because of that, I think
yeah.
Wyoming's going to play them close. I think they're going to get smoked by Oregon week 2. That's just a rough start to the season, and then as it goes on the Big 12 play, I'm not a believer in Texas Tech.
We might have to bet against each other that Oregon game because that's in Lubbock, I think.
Yes, it's in
And
Lubbock.
I think Tech is going to win that game potentially. I'll be interested to see what the point spread is in
Do you
that.
want to take it straight up? I mean, I would guess Oregon's probably going to be about a touchdown favorite in that game.
Yeah, yeah, I'll do it straight up. A little podcast bet.
Straight up. Oh man. All right, let's do it.
Hell yeah. Um, I like the quarterback Tyler Shuck. I think that's how you say his name, even though it's spelt like show. I don't really know. But I just think they're a dark horse in this league. I like what I saw from them with McGuire. Just the guys play with belief, and I think it's the first time in a long time Tech fans are actually proud of their Red Raiders. So I'm
Yeah,
rooting for them to kind of be a
I don't think
spunky
they've been
team.
this hyped since the start of the Kingsbury era. But
Yeah.
I mean, that obviously didn't go too well. Actually, I think they went to a bowl game their first year. I think it might have actually been the best year in the Kingsbury era, but
Uh huh.
not 100%
Um.
sure on that. But yeah, but I think so.
When
I think it was.
I'm gonna move it into TCU, and after TCU, I think is a really big drop off in the league. I think these first five teams we discussed can all win the I could see them winning the conference, just by hook or crook. TCU 11-1, and still can't believe they played for the national title last year. I mean, my goodness. And Josh, just getting to know you a little bit more, I think you're probably a better gambler than me because you're kind of more of a realist, like we were talking about with Tech. You're not high on them. I was high on them. But if I was never that high on this TCU team last year, even though they went on a run, I was all over Georgia in that national championship. I thought that was a gift, minus 13. And was it minus 13 and a half?
Yeah, it's somewhere along those lines. Yeah,
I
that
think
TCU
that's
team
what it
didn't
was.
belong on the field. It was. I mean, look, they just caught lightning in a bottle. Had a bunch of older guys, which it's easy to say in
Yeah.
hindsight. No one has predicted them preseason. But here's the interesting thing for me with TCU is that the guy that beat out Max Duggan, who led him to the national title game,
Uh huh.
is Chandler Morris, and he's going to be their starting quarterback this year. So if
Yeah.
TCU has hopes of getting back to where they were, that's going to be it. I mean, again, I've talked about close games with other teams. TCU's another team that was on the right side of a bunch of close games last year. So um, probably a few more losses, but it's another team's going to be right up there with Kansas State, right up there with OU, right up there with Texas, has a shot to win the Big 12.
Totally agree. And I'm hoping Max Duggan wasn't the special sauce and they come back down to earth because I really think TCU could be one of the juggernauts in this new look Big 12. Just with their location, the way they should be able to recruit. But yeah, I think there's a gap now when we move it to Baylor 20-1 to win the league. I think there is a gap between these first five and the rest of the conference. Uh,
Well, I'll give you a
yeah,
little bit
go
of
ahead.
disagreement there. I think Dave Aranda does a really good job down in Baylor. I think Baylor was, we talked about the luck factor last year. I think Baylor was a little bit unlucky after being fairly lucky to reach the Big 12 title game the year before.
Hmm.
I think Baylor's a team that could be sneaky. If you're looking for a long shot to take the Big 12, I think Baylor's it. Do I think they'll actually win the Big 12? No. Do I think they'll actually make the title game? No. But I do think they're going to be a team that puts a scare into the top tier, and I do think they'll be up near the top tier by the end of the year. So I am a
Yeah,
believer in the Baylor Bears this year.
like that. And they got a quarterback battle a little bit. I know Shapen is the presumed starter, but they bring in a kid from Mississippi State. So that's that question mark right there kind of scares me off a little bit with them. And their defense was bad last year. I don't know if everybody realizes how bad it was. They had to bring in a new defensive coordinator in from Oregon, and I don't think Oregon's defense is that good either last year. So I don't know, but I do agree with you. I think if I had to pick a coach that's better than Chris Kleiman, it might be Dave Aranda for best coach in this conference. And the Big 12 over the years, I've thought has pretty good coaches in this league. I think that's one of the things that a lot of the mainstream college football media hasn't got about the Big 12. It's just been a really good coaching conference, at least in my opinion.
Well, I mean, here's the thing with those coaches, though. Everyone looks good when they win and not as good when they lose. So
Yeah,
we'll we'll see how that goes. It's kind of like how have they done? What have you done for me recently? Type thing.
exactly.
Because Aranda looked really good 2 years ago. Last year, he didn't look as good. You look at a guy like Matt Campbell at Iowa State, like he looked great when he had Brock Purdy. He doesn't look as good now. So coaching's like one of those things. It's always like I've always thought about it. Like players don't always get better. Why do coaches always get better year over year? And that's kind of thing there too. Like Matt Campbell, like 3-4 years ago, he was a hot name. Like, hey, people are going to try to get him now. Now, no one
Yeah,
will. So I mean, except for Iowa State fans.
yeah, I see that. UCF. This is a program that's interesting to me, and I think you said it earlier in the pod. They could be one of the newcomers that I think down the road, being down there in Florida. Gus Malzahn. I don't know how to feel about Gus Malzahn as a coach. I don't think he's that great, but he is. I just can't get a good feel for him as a coach. At Auburn, it was up and down, but he was able to beat Saban. And UCF, they're kind of disappointing last year, but I think they're playing right now actually. But
Yeah, UCF playing Kent State. They're up like 14-3 last I looked. It's a preseason game, basically. All these
yeah,
crappy non-conference games, like you can't take anything away from them. Like they don't mean anything. It's one team's 35-point favorite. It's it's
yeah,
not
and
something. You take something away from that, you're gonna have a worse opinion than if you just didn't watch the game. So that's the thing. But we watch for entertainment.
yeah, they
So no.
got Plumlee in there at quarterback, and I guess he plays baseball, and so that's one of the things I've heard why he hasn't really taken that step forward because he started his career at Ole Miss and got some playing time with under Lane Kiffin, and a lot of people thought he was going to be a good quarterback, but I think he's kind of been up and down, and so I'll be interested to see how this season goes for him. Um, is their offensive line any good? I guess it was the weakness of the team last year and something that they're really going to put some emphasis on. And
Yeah,
defensively, they
the
returned.
issue.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, the issue I was going to say, the issue with John Reese Plumlee is, he's been able to run, but he can't pass. That's why Matt Corral beat him out at Ole Miss, and I
Yeah,
don't think he'd be ahead of Jackson Dart now or whoever the other guy is. Oh, didn't Ole Miss get Spencer Sanders? No, that was Auburn.
yeah, they
Uh,
did.
Ole Miss did get Spencer Sanders. Yeah, I don't think he'd be ahead of either one of those guys because issues in the passing game. But he is a really fast runner. I mean, he runs a great option game. He does kind of lose the football a little bit too much, also.
Uh
But
huh.
that's kind of like Central Florida's thing. They've been an AAC school, not a Big 12 school. The recruits haven't been as good. I know John Reese Plumlee was a transfer, but I mean, that's kind of going to be their issue this year. But I do think they'll be the best of the new four, or whatever
Yeah,
we're going to call them.
and I think they'll get talented kids to come play there. I really do, and they got a lot of transfers coming in, and Derek LeBlanc, OU guy that was signed, committed to OU. I think he went through spring ball. He ended up getting in the transfer portal, and he's on UCF now. So they're definitely trying to get some talent in there on the defense. But I just think stepping up to the Big 12, their defense is a really big concern for me, and I think they're definitely a couple years away from being what they want to be in the Big 12.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. I mean, Central Florida's good recruiting ground. Orlando's a good football area and not far from Tampa, Miami. You can convince kids to come there. I mean, they're probably not going to win too many recruiting battles against Florida, Florida State, or any other big school that comes into town, but they probably will be able to recruit some players and be able
Yeah.
to out recruit some Big 12 schools as well. I mean, the competition is going to be the Texas schools who haven't been historically great recruiters either.
Uh
So
huh.
yeah, I agree with you that they're a couple weeks out.
Yeah. So that's UCF. Moving it on, Oklahoma State, Josh, 28-1, and they were a disappointment last year after being so close to that Big 12 title in 2021, so close to a playoff appearance. Um, just they were just lethargic last year. Gundy, we'll see if he can keep his win streak alive, his winning season streak alive. 17 straight winning seasons for Mike Gundy. And there's just something off with this program, though. You mentioned Spencer Sanders transferred out of there. There just seems like, I don't know, Gundy puts his name out there for different jobs all the time. I just is what do you think, Josh? Is this the end of the Mike Gundy era potentially?
Well, sorry, my mic was off. Well, it's got to end at some point, right? But I don't quite think it's now. I pretty much think Mike Gundy's there as long as he wants to be in Stillwater. I know there's donors that are tired of him, but I mean, Boone Pickens got tired of him when he was there, and Mike Gundy made it all the way through the Boone Pickens era, who's the biggest booster out there.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma State's an interesting case though this year, and here's why.
Yeah.
We talked about Texas, how they never put it together. Every single season that OSU has came into where they didn't have high expectations. Every single season they have exceeded those expectations.
Uh huh.
Every single time they've at least they go like 9-3. Sometimes they've made the Big 12 title game. I think it's been 2011 was the last time they were hyped up and actually had a good season. I think 2014 they were actually pretty hyped up too. But every other year they've been hyped up. They kind of underplayed it, and when they were not hyped up, they've overplayed it. So that's another where it's like, if I'm going to sit here and say I can't take Texas to win the Big 12 because they are always predicted to win the Big 12 and they never do, then also I can't say Oklahoma State's going to have a terrible season because
Yeah.
they lost a lot of players. Even though on paper it looks like they're going to be terrible. I mean, you got to give Oklahoma State the benefit of the doubt because they've earned that in the past. So I don't think they're going to be
Yeah.
horrible. I don't think they're going to compete for the Big 12, but I do think they'll be decent this year.
That's good
Just
stuff.
based on past history. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's
There's
good stuff.
nothing there on paper that says they'll be any good.
Looking at the historical context of it, you really do. I really do want to take their win total over now. I've just It's 6.5, and it's kind of just a bet if Gundy's going to keep that winning season streak alive. I guess they could go 6-6 and win the bowl game and still say they had the winning season. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
If you
I
remember
hadn't thought about it from that perspective, Josh.
the re-kick game was in 2015, 2014. That was the last time they were actually projected to be really good that year. And
Hmm.
they just had like um, a bad season, I guess is
Right.
the best way to put it. And they were just that close to not having the bowl streak because they would have just lost to OU, which they were down by 14 in the fourth quarter. And they came back and won.
Yeah, we
In
don't
a
need to talk
game,
about it.
frankly, that they almost never win. So yeah, it's there. It is possible that they do lose it, but again, it's like I said, Oklahoma State's been a team that people just haven't been able to predict. They usually go over their win total because
Uh huh.
they're underrated, and this is another year where Oklahoma State's underrated. So I'm going to jump on them and say that they're going to be a lot better than people think.
Yeah, I just I just don't know if I can get there just because I think their defense is going to be pretty bad. Gundy hired a new defensive coordinator from Division II, Gannon University. Never heard of that school before. So
Well, the last time he did that, do you know who they got? The offense coordinator. They
was
had an
it
offense coordinator from D2. Do you know who that is?
offensive coordinator?
Offensive coordinator, yeah. They got him from a D2 school. It might have even been D3.
Not
Can you
sure.
name
Was
them?
that Holgerson?
No, it was Mike Yursich, who is
Okay.
now, I believe, is at Penn State now.
Yeah,
I might be wrong
that
on that.
sounds right.
I think he's at Penn State. He's at a bigger school now. I know that. So,
Yeah.
which I always think is interesting because Gundy just looked at who's doing the best in D2, D3, hired that guy. So I think that's what he did here. So again, it kind of worked out. I know Yursich, when he was there, a lot of Oklahoma State fans did complain about him. I don't know how much of it's his fault. A lot of it's offensive coordinators. Some of it's just how good is your quarterback rather than how
Uh-huh.
good you're scheming. But he did
Yeah.
have some good offensive seasons when he was there. I think he was there in the Mason Rudolph era towards the end when they put up some really big offensive numbers.
Uh-huh.
So with this guy, like, have you heard of him? No. Have I heard of him? No. Do I know if he's going to be good? No. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because we've seen it before with Oklahoma State, and we've seen him be successful like that before.
Yeah, 100%. And I think my biggest gripe, if I was an OSU fan when it comes to Gundy, is he's just so apathetic towards recruiting. Like, I think if he just took recruiting just like 10% more seriously, OSU could field a really good team, and they wouldn't always have to be this less talented team all the time. You know?
I absolutely agree with you. I think it's very difficult to recruit to Oklahoma State. On one point, I do know, or at least kind of implied from stuff I've gathered up there, that Mike Holder is the kind of athletic director. He doesn't spend as much money as football as Mike Gundy would like.
Mm.
Mike Holder was a golf coach at OSU. He likes to invest in the smaller programs, and you've seen OSU have success in wrestling and in golf and in
Oh yeah.
baseball and
Oh
even
yeah.
softball. Like even they're not OU in softball, but they made a few Women's College World Series. They made Men's College World Series a couple of years back. He likes to invest in that more so I think there's been some friction there a little bit. And I think Mike Gundy kind of overdid it when he stopped recruiting. And that's just my opinion. That's not based on anything I know. That's just
Yeah. No,
what
that
I'm
makes
guessing.
sense.
You're right about him being apathetic, but I think he was trying to also prove a point to Holder a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you got to be able to recruit. I mean, everything we've seen is recruiting has a high correlation. Good recruiting is a high correlation with winning, and it
Oh yeah.
doesn't mean that you're going to be winning. You look at Texas A&M. It also doesn't mean that if you're bad, you're going to be losing. I mean, Oklahoma State's probably a fairly good example of that. But it is very important, and yes, Gundy does need to pick it up on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and that's good stuff right there, Josh. Um, Iowa State 40-1 to win the Big 12. Matt Campbell has always been a tough out. The Cyclones, a little bit like OSU, when they don't think they're going to be good, they kind of rise up and have like a random 8-9 win season, and they've consistently put out one of the best defenses in the Big 12. Just that scheme they run used to always give Lincoln fits. Used to always at least slow him down at least. Uh, but do they still have that shitty kicker from last year? Did you see that kicker they had last year, Josh? He cost them at least 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, that's the thing with Iowa State. They've been very unlucky the past few years. The one year that they, were good and like won a bunch of close games is the year they made it to the Big 12 title game. But that's kind of the thing. ISU is such a bad football school historically that it's hard for them to get a lot of blowouts where they're beating a lot of teams. They're usually never the more talented team on the field. And now that Kansas is kind of back to being a real football team, Iowa State is on the lower end of the talent scale right now. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you could argue BYU or Houston's worse, but that's their problem right now, basically, is they just don't have the talent to compete. Unless you get a quarterback like Brock Purdy that can overcome that, which is very hard at a school like Iowa State, I think they're going to struggle. I'm not high on Iowa State, and I do want to point out I was one of the first ones on the Iowa State bandwagon. I actually picked them to go to the Big 12 title game in 2019, which they didn't. They lost a bunch of close games that year. And the year after is when they made it. So it was a year early on them.
Uh
But
huh.
I am out on Iowa State now.
Yeah, they just don't have the quarterback since Purdy left there last year. At least that left-handed quarterback, he just wasn't doing it for me. And that kicker, man, I'm telling you, that kicker they had cost them games last year. So I don't know. They were just tough to watch, and maybe maybe their luck will change this year. They'll win a couple of those close losses. Just Matt Campbell's a good coach. I think he'll figure out a way to get them to a bowl game this year at least. Um,
Yeah, that's kind of where ISU's ceiling is the bowl game. Um, they're not a team that's going to compete for the Big 12. They are a team that's going to compete for a lower tier bowl game. Like, trying to think, I think the Holiday Bowl's on the lower sketch side now. The Big 12. I remember it used to be like one of the bigger games for the Big 12, but now I
uh-huh.
think it's kind of lower. Big 12 might
Cheese It
not be in the
Bowl.
Holiday Bowl anymore. Yeah, really, like Independence Bowl. They just went there a few years ago. I know
Uh-huh.
Kansas went last year, so maybe one of those lower tier bowl games. Then again, now the way they do it, they don't do it by slots. Now that I think about it, they just
Oh
do it.
yeah,
They can pick any team. This is why OU played Florida State last year.
yeah, and
So
that
OU
game's
basically, by being a big name, goes to a big bowl. Same with Texas, if they
that
make it.
game is why I think OU can be good this year because they really showed out versus a Florida State team that's what like eighth in the country, at least in the top 10. And so yeah, that bowl games are the best, man. And speaking of bowls, one team that made a bowl for the first time in forever, the Kansas Jayhawks, baby, 40-1 to win this league, and they were just one of the better feel good stories from last year in college football. They return a lot of the same pieces. Lance Leipold's got those fans believing, and I really like their offense, Josh. I think that scheme is really creative, features a lot of motion, a lot of play action. I just think he puts his guys in the best position to succeed. And talent isn't great there, but Leipold knows how to scheme it up.
Dipold's recruiting a lot better out there. I'll tell you what, He's won everywhere he's gone. I don't remember where he was. He's at some D3 school with Whitewater or
Buffalo.
something like that. Before Buffalo.
Oh, I'm
Before he
not
went to
sure.
Buffalo, he's at like a D3 school where they dominated. And then he went to Buffalo, turned them around. Turning around Kansas is one of the most impressive things I've seen.
Yeah,
Kansas is an interesting team. They have so many players returning. They went 6-6 last year. You think they're going to improve. On the flip side, they're a team that made a big jump. So again, like I talked about earlier, it's kind of like the plexiglass principle, where if you go from very few wins to a lot of wins, you tend to go back down towards lower wins. If you go from a lot of wins to a lot of losses, it goes the opposite way. You tend to go back up.
right.
It'll be interesting to see. I do think Kansas has the talent to overcome that. I do think at 40-1, it's worth it. Are they going to win it? No. Are they going to win the Big 12 once in every 40 tries? I think it's very possible.
Yeah, that's all you're
Dan,
looking for with a long shot.
yeah, whichever Daniels it is, Jaden or Jalen, I get them confused. The other one's at LSU.
Uh huh.
He's a really good quarterback,
He
and
is, and Jason
up
Bean at
there,
backup isn't bad either.
I don't know who their backup is, but I do think Daniels is really going to help them. They're starting to get this class that they had in before. It wasn't really D1 players as much or FBS players, less so even Power 5 players. Now they're starting to get recruits that would be Power 5 players. So it's going to be interesting to see Kansas this year. They're not going to be able to sneak up on anyone, but I do think that's a team. I don't know if they're going to compete for the Big 12, but I am pretty high on the Jayhawks this year.
Yeah, yeah, and they should be improved a little bit. They got some transfers coming in. I think a lot of kids around the country like what they saw with that Kansas team last year, and they're fun to watch for sure. So definitely a
It'd be
team I want to throw on the TV.
If they turn that team around, this is one of the best coaching jobs there's been. Might not be the best coaching job even in the state of Kansas, but it's still going to be one of the best in college football. Of course, Bill Snyder turning around K-State's
Oh, yeah,
very impressive. They have a much longer losing streak than Kansas, but turning around Kansas is right up there.
yeah, that's interesting. Both of those Kansas schools have been down bad before, and so it's the Jayhawks, baby. They're just I like watching them. I like watching that offense, and um, we'll see how year two with Leipold goes. If he does really good, I could see him getting calls from some big schools. I just don't know how long he's going to stay there. Um, but One team that's switching conferences coming up to the Big 12, Cincinnati, the Bearcats, 50-1. This they've been a proud football program over the years. They produced a lot of Power 5 coaches too. Brian Kelly, Luke Fickle last year going to Wisconsin. Now they're in the Power 5. So maybe Scott Satterfield, he's coming in to be the coach, coming in from Louisville. Maybe that's one of the things he liked about this job is Cincinnati joining the
I,
Big 12.
I think it was more Louisville was going to get rid of him anyway, so he wanted to have a job. I'm
Yeah.
not too high on
Yeah.
Satterfield. I think the biggest thing Cincinnati is they're kind of going through what OU went through last year, but on a lesser scale as far as talent. They lost most of their talented players to the NFL 2 years ago. Luke Fickle going to Wisconsin, they lost a bunch of players. So I don't think they're quite there yet. I don't think they're ready for the Big 12, and I'm not a big believer in Satterfield, but it's like
Mm,
Cincinnati's probably the most interesting team on the list. Like they missed their 2 years ago, and they could be competing for the Big 12 title, or 2 3 years, whenever they made the playoffs, whenever that was. Um, but now, no, and I don't think they're ready for the Big 12 at all. They don't have the offense for it. Their defense, I think they lost a bunch of people last year. Maybe they
yeah.
have a bunch returning. It was one or the other. I can't quite remember, but I don't remember being high on their defense. So I
Yeah, they
think
got
they're
a
losing a bunch of players.
they got a ton of new here, like you were mentioning the comparisons of OU, just a lot of transfers, a lot of new coaches. It's going to be a difficult year for them to acclimate to the Big 12. It's going to take them a couple years
Yeah,
to
yeah, I
really
think that's where
to
they're
find their
at.
footing.
Yeah, Florida on the doorsteps of Utah. Like, looks like they just picked up a 3rd and 12 on a scramble
Oh
with
yeah,
quarterback fumbling. And they'll
this
set
has
up
the
3-0 with
makings of
Nebraska and NC State up 10-7.5 on UConn. Also, Tulsa down 7-0 to Pine Bluff at halftime.
what's that Yukon score?
10-7 NC State.
Okay,
The
that's
NC State just kicked a field goal
looking good.
before half. So yeah, man.
Um,
I mean, bet's looking good so far. Still got a half to go. Don't jinx it.
yeah, this Nebraska Minnesota game in a stalemate, just classic Big Ten football, 3-0 in the second quarter.
Yeah, that's
Gotta
another
love it.
low-scoring game. The total is like in the low 40s, and it's going by NFL rules. So
Yeah,
I think we're seeing an under there, even though it's easy to say with 3 points scored in the second quarter.
yeah. So we'll see how it gets going. Let's move it on to West Virginia, Josh. Got a couple more teams here. West Virginia, 50-1. And head coach Neil Brown, he's got one of the hottest seats in America. You know,
Yeah, he's in trouble. West Virginia's. I'm with the consensus that they're not going to be very good next year. Kind of thinks
yeah.
they were good a few years ago, but I think they're just falling apart, and I think they continue that kind of downward trend.
Hmm.
Were they like 5-7 last year or whatever? I mean, they did beat OU for the first time in their
Yes,
history
they
on
did.
a walk-off field goal. Um, yeah, a lot of that, conservative coaching came back to bite OU in that game. But we'll see how West Virginia is. I'm not very big on them.
Yeah, me either. Just too many questions at quarterback. They have the entire offensive line back, but if they don't have a decent quarterback, it's not going to mean anything. And we'll see. That defense was bad too. They the offense needs to do a better job of keeping them off the field. I think West Virginia's issue last year, their offense was so inept. The defense had to be out there for forever. So I think if they clean that up a little bit, this defense could improve. But man, I guess West Virginia hasn't had back-to-back losing seasons in over 40 years, Josh. So they could be in
Wow,
trouble. They can be in
that's
trouble with
impressive.
that
You don't think
streak.
of them as a football school, but they've had some, decent teams at least. Nothing.
Yeah.
Only those 7 year where they're really good, but they haven't had any that compete for the national title. But they've been at least consistent.
Hmm. What a crazy year that 2007 was. I'm hoping
Yeah,
we can get a year like that in college again. I just don't know if
it'll happen at
all
some
these
point.
teams are
But
too dominant.
it'll happen at some point. But that was a wild year. It was a maybe once in 100 type thing.
It
But
could
it does happen.
happen.
It'll happen.
Maybe if NIL gets figured out in like 5 years from now and teams can like really pay like recruits. I think recruiting could balance off and teams like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State wouldn't get like all the 5 stars. I think you're starting to see that a little bit. It's starting to balance out a little bit, but still, those three teams in particular just have so much talent. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, recruiting is one of those things that just cycles, but I think more so now that there's been recruiting services and the rise in the 20 teens with those. When you see like, oh, Alabama's number one every year and you're a recruit, and you see Georgia's number one every year, you're like, oh, well, I'm really good. I can go to those schools. And it kind of has a snowball effect where the teams get better and better and get more recruits because they're always up there.
Uh
You know,
huh.
it's more impressive to say, oh, I'm going to OU versus, oh, I'm going to Utah, which is why OU tends to
Yeah,
get better recruits than Utah.
100%. Um, BYU, moving on to them, they're a school that they kind of get kids to go in there and they sell them on the religious stuff, and usually their players are older. They're able to stockpile some older players because they go and do mission work, and I don't know if that's even legit or if they just do that so they can get older football players. But either way, they're coming to the Big 12 this year, and I don't know. They're bringing in Keaton Slovis, the journeyman college football quarterback. This is his third stop already.
Yeah,
Um,
somehow Slovis is supposed to be good everywhere, but hadn't been able to win the job anywhere he's been. I'm not trying to rip on the kid or anything, but is he going to be good? Probably not. Is he going to be decent? Probably. Is BYU a team that's even going to sniff the Big 12 title this year? Or I don't think so. I think BYU is another team that missed its window, but they're another
mhm.
team that could be interesting in the Big 12 in the future. Like BYU's had tons of good teams; they'll be able to bring in recruits. But right now, I don't think they're close to being in the Big 12 conversation. Really.
Yeah, yeah, they're a long ways away, and so is another newcomer. The last team we're going to break down, the Houston Cougars. They're a long ways away. They have the worst odds, 100 to 1 to win the league, and I'm just not a huge fan of Holgers. I just think he's one of those guys you see in football, just really, really good, probably elite offensive coordinator, but he just is not a good head coach. And I don't know. Houston's had some good years under him in that American Conference, but I just think I don't know. I think he could be a coach that maybe is there for a year or two, and then Houston needs to go find themselves a really good coach because I think this program could be a really attractive program in that Houston area. I know you're a Houston guy, aren't you, Josh?
Yep. Grew up in the Houston area. I can tell you a little bit something about Houston, though. They're another school that they had one good season and they thought of themselves too much better, which weirdly enough also happens to A&M and Texas. Think they're better than they actually are. Put in a big contract for Major Applewhite so he wouldn't leave the school, and then they wanted to fire him. And then
Mm,
they pulled Holgerson from West Virginia right before Holgo was going to go. Nebraska just threw a pick. Looked like the receiver was held, but no flag.
damn it,
Anyway,
Huskers was a good
anyway,
player.
yeah. Anyway, Houston's another team. I think they've lost too many players to be competitive in the Big 12 this year, and they're another team that missed their window by a few years to have a shot at the Big 12 at least like this year or next year. But
Yeah,
it is still Houston area's got a ton of people in it. They got a bunch of recruits, so it is a team that could eventually be a power in the conference. But again,
yeah.
last time they were in a major conference, the Southwest Conference, they had like maybe 4 seasons where they were top dogs. So
Oh, really?
that's just what Houston is. Yeah, in the 90s when they had Andre Ware, who won the Heisman 1990, 1991 time frame.
Yeah,
That's about it for Houston.
yeah. So they could be that. They could be a middling team, but then maybe they get some awesome quarterback here or there, make some noise. So I think they'll be a fun. I like these additions. The Big 12 did the smart thing adding these schools. I know they kind of got made fun of a little bit when it first happened, but you see the demise of the Pac-12 that really puts things in perspective. That the commissioner did the right thing adding these 4 teams, and I think Houston's going to be fun.
We'll
I
see. I don't think so. I think they're going to be fighting for last place in the Big 12. I don't think they have the talent right now, but in the future, yeah. I mean, all those teams in the Big 12. You're like, well, they could be sneaky good at some point. I
Yeah,
mean, pretty much everyone, but I mean, I was going to say Iowa State, but Iowa State's actually played in a Big 12 title game from just about everyone but Kansas. But I think
Uh-huh.
Leopold, however you say his name, he's a good coach. He's going to get him some recruits, and Kansas could also be another team that's good. So it'll be a
Yep.
fun league even when OU and Texas leave.
Yes, it will. Do you have a pick to win the Big 12?
Um, man, it's just so wide open. There's so many. I'll go ahead
Yeah.
and go out. I'll go. Man, I'm
I know you kind of
thinking
like
like
Baylor.
Oklahoma has the problems that we like. Every team has a problem with Texas, Oklahoma.
This should
I'll
be the
go. I'll
year
go
Texas
sneaky. I'll
wins.
say. I'll say K State goes back to back. How about that?
Oh yeah, like that. Just the coaching and the physicality could win out. That could be the difference, you know. Um, Texas should win it this year. You know, it's going to be hilarious when they don't, and the Sooners bring it home. But I'm going to
Yeah.
say Texas OU in a rematch in Dallas, and I think Texas wins the regular season matchup. OU wins the Big 12 title.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. I'll say K State over OU. In Arlington. I mean, OU can't win every single game in Arlington, right?
That
so
would, yeah, that kind of be storybook for OU with Venables and playing Kansas State their last Big 12 games. I know Venables is he got a start in Kansas State.
yeah, he went to Kansas State. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be storybook for sure. You got any bets you want to give out for this weekend, Josh? I know you're into gambling at least somewhat.
Yeah, I like a lot of the unders this week. A lot of the, especially if you're doing same game parlays, I usually don't recommend them all that much. But if you got high spreads like A&M, New Mexico, like New Mexico's plus like 38, you got that, and then like totals, I think it's in the 50s. I would parlay those. A lot of the unders this week. I'm not sure if the books have caught up. I know last week, definitely not. But the games are moving faster, and I think we'll see a lot
Yeah.
of unders tonight, tomorrow, and I think the
Uh-huh.
lines will eventually catch up by. They might even catch up by Saturday, so I'd get on it now if you're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the unders are going to be the move this year. I'm usually an unders guy. I don't like for some reason I don't like taking over because I feel like every play I just want a touchdown to happen and I get like impatient when it doesn't. So I'm really not good at betting totals in general, but I definitely think unders are the ones to go after. I have a couple unders this week. I took Colorado State, Washington State under 54 and a half. I was hoping for a snooze fest in that game and that Wyoming Tech game. Did you mention you kind of like Wyoming plus the points? I
Yeah,
took
I
the
like Wyoming
under.
plus the points in that one. But I don't like that as much as I like taking the unders and the parlay thing I just talked about because I don't think that's going
Yeah,
to be available. Gambling's more about finding an edge. It's not really who you like or how many points you think someone's going to score. You got to find an edge, even if it's not fun. That's what winning a gambling's about.
yeah. That's one of the things I've had to learn over the years for sure. Um,
Yep.
just some bets I like. I like Miami tomorrow minus 16 and a half. Miami's a program I'm high on this year. I think it was such a disaster last year, and there are a lot of the stuff we talk about with Texas. You know, they're usually a hype team. They usually don't live up to it, but Cristobal, man, he brought in so much talent. I think they got to come out and start hot, and they're playing tomorrow night. So I like that one. Saturday bets. I really like SMU to cover minus 20. I think they come out red hot. And I like Tennessee minus 28. I like this Virginia team is going to be a team I fade all year. The Virginia Cavaliers. And I think Tennessee, they're going to want to come out, show Joe Milton that he's the real deal, and they'll come out hot. So there's a few of my bets this year or this week. You have any futures bets?
I have not done many futures bets. My issue with futures bets, they kind of tie up part of your bankroll. So unless
Yeah,
your roll's like very deep, um, it's just not the bet I'd want to make. So
yeah.
that's just my thing on it.
I made the OU to win the Big 12. Talked about that one, and I bet Jordan Travis, the quarterback Florida State, to win the Heisman, 14-1.
Who'd you pick? Jordan. Wait, I thought
Jordan
Deion.
Travis.
I thought Deion Sanders' kid was going to be the quarterback at Colorado.
No, the Florida State kid.
Oh, Florida State. I don't know why I don't know why I was thinking Colorado.
They
Oh
have
yeah,
that
yeah.
Travis
Well,
Hunter. That's who you're thinking of.
well, yeah. That might be it right there. Yeah, Florida State. I mean, if they have a good year, I kind of don't think they will. But if they do, they go undefeated. I mean, you got a good chance, especially like when those middling top 10 teams, when they have a quarterback, when they go undefeated, jump up in the playoffs, like their quarterback will
Yeah,
generally be a Heisman type guy.
my thinking is he'll come out Sunday night prime time and ball out versus LSU, and that will really start the Heisman campaign for him.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean it will. That's the big thing with those guys. They lose a game though, it's all over.
yeah, no doubt.
Well,
You
best of
you
luck
ever? Oh,
on your
sorry.
bet. Oh no, I was just saying best of luck on your bets. Rooting for you.
Yeah. Um, fun stuff, Josh. Before I get you out of here, ever hear from Traber?
Yeah, I mean we talk sometimes with him at the poker rooms, um,
Oh, nice.
every once in a while. So yeah, I mean we still
Me,
say hey, how you doing? You know.
me and my buddies love him, man. If you ever see him, tell him we need some more of those Shaping the Minds T-shirts because
Oh yeah,
he was
he
selling
loves it.
those.
Man.
Me and my buddies want one, but he said they were sold out.
Call into his show and tell him to get more. He might do it. But yeah, Traver's genuine guy is the same off the radio as he is on the radio. It's a very entertaining show.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me because he's just who he is, and that's what makes him such a great personality. And I miss being up there in Oklahoma. I live down here in Dallas now, and that was just must watch or must listen to radio from I think it was 2 to 4 was his
Yeah,
showtime.
yeah, the 2 to 6, two to
Two to
four is by
six.
himself. Four to six, he's on with Al. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's a real entertaining show.
me and my buddies, we would have baseball practice that start at like 2:30 or 3, and we would always have him playing in the batting cages, his radio show.
That's good.
So
Good stuff, man. You got to call. I'll call in and tell him. I'd love to hear it.
yeah, I need to start doing that. But yeah, Josh, a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this, man. You got any
Yeah, no,
closing thoughts? Anything you want to plug or anything?
I don't have anything to plug nowadays, but I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. That's gonna do it. Find your inner pirate Big 12 preview. Swing your sword.